Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to another Climate Emergency Centre Wednesday webinar, where a very old friend, lovely man, Josef Davies-Coates, who's uh, a deep researcher on many environmental projects and things. He's working currently with Community Energy England, and they have a kind of alliance of a whole range of community groups that they're helping to accelerate the use of renewable energy and getting the community into that kind of thing. So, without too much further ado, over to you, Joseph. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks very much for having me, Phoenix. Welcome, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. This presentation is going to be about Community Energy England. I'm Joseph Davies-Coates. I'm the Heat and Retrofit Coordinator at Community Energy England. I joined them last May, so I'm just over a year in this sector. The quick overview of what I'm going to go through today. I'm going to give a quick introduction to Community Energy England, describe my role at what I do there, quick overview of the funding available for home energy upgrades and for community energy itself, and then an invitation to join us. So first of all, let's have an introduction to community energy. So Community Energy England, our vision is a thriving community energy sector integrated into and truly powering a fair zero carbon energy system. And our mission is to create the conditions within which community energy is able to thrive and scale. At the moment, we've got over 320 members all across the country. They're mostly community members, which are organisations dedicated to doing community energy work, whether that's energy efficiency advice or doing community solar or community wind or whatever it might be. But we've also got members from the public and private sector as well, local authorities, some of the distribution network organizations that actually run the grid and stuff, and various other partners. And yeah, there's a lot going on. It's quite a movement. This is a little snapshot of our national map, which shows all of the projects that solar and wind and all that sort of stuff, or EV chargers, etc., that we know that our members have done from our annual State of the Sector survey. And the reality is even more than this because we don't capture all the data. This is the data we've got. We don't know about absolutely everything out there. I mentioned the state of the sector. This is later in the autumn. We'll have the latest results from 24 in state of the sector 2025, but this is the most recent from last year. I won't go through all of this, but I can share the slides afterwards. And that has some of the stats about community energy in the UK. But yeah, they generate lots of energy, they help lots of people save money on their energy bills, they raise lots of investment for community renewables, etc. And yeah, there's lots of research that shows that community energy is better energy, effectively. The LGA Sustainability Briefing on Community Energy says that supporting local development of community energy projects has positive impacts on equality, social cohesion, and economic opportunity. And a nice report by UK 100 and the UK Power Networks says that advantages of community energy projects over private sector projects are that they allow wealth building, local wealth building, support local improvement, improve engagement with local residents by being locally owned and led, and they often operate on a non-for-profit basis, normally do, with any excess reinvested back into the communities they power. More on how much better it is. So there's increasing research about this, and I haven't actually incorporated the latest big report on the social value generated by community energy, but these reports linked to here show that community energy are more than 4 to 5 times better at engaging the public than commercial players. So if you get, I think that's based on the report that they compared city gas, British Gas effectively knocking on doors offering energy efficiency advice with Southeast London Community Energy doing the same. And yeah, the uptake was nearly 5 times better for Celsea than it was for City Gas. Other research shows that it brings 12 to 13 times the social benefit of commercial projects. The fuel poverty work that lots of our members do has been shown to have a 10 to 1 social return on investment. And yeah, in Scotland, there's research that shows that community-owned wind farms deliver 34 times more financial return to local communities than non-community owned wind farms.
Joseph, does that mean like 34 more times the funds go back into the local community rather than just off to a big corporation that owns the wind farm?
Exactly that, yeah.
So it reduces their bill and they can invest in more renewables.
It doesn't necessarily reduce their bill based on how the energy markets work, but there are various campaigns about trying to change that. Um,
Cool.
that's a bit technical, and I'm not the best person to talk to about it. But yeah, I mean, there is a consultation open at the moment, which is worth mentioning. I'll try and, after I've done my presentation, I'll whack it in the link. But there's consultation now about shared ownership of renewable energy projects and whether that should be a mandatory thing. So, some of the scale of the stuff that needs to be done urgently isn't ever going to be 100% community owned because we're talking hundreds of billions. But there's a strong argument for mandating that all of them have a part ownership by the community so that some of that, at least some of that benefit is captured and goes back to the communities where these windmills and solar farms, etc., are based. So yeah, I'll just go a bit into my role at Community Energy England. So I'm the heat and retrofit coordinator, as I mentioned. Just because of my lack of time, and I started with heat. This is mostly about heat, but of course there's loads of overlap because you have to retrofit a house or any other building in order to make it easier to heat with low carbon technologies, or even to just save money, even if you're still stuck in your gas boiler or your oil burner or whatever. But it's a big heat from our buildings is a big chunk of carbon emissions. The graphic on the right is from 2019, where it shows that homes residential heat was 17% of UK emissions. Um, I think the latest figures have slightly dropped. It's 66.6% of 20%, which is about 13 or something. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that's partly because those figures are from years where there were a couple of mild winters. So people weren't using as much gas and electric as normal. Um, but yeah, and that later 2023 figure actually excludes electricity, which some people do heat with. Well, they all do if you're using a heat pump. Um, and yeah, part of the problem is that lots of people can't afford to heat their houses. So we need to make it more affordable and lower carbon at the same time. National Energy Action estimate that 5.6 million households are in fuel poverty. Um, but this recent report from Friends of the Earth says that one third of all households, 9.6 million households, can't afford a decent standard of living and are in poorly insulated homes. And this report from BRE, I forget exactly what that stands for, um, on the cost of poor housing in England. This is the 2021 briefing paper, and actually the latest paper isn't quite as stark and bad, but this says that the cost of the NHS of poor housing was 1.4 billion a year. But if that's just direct costs, but if you add in all the wider societal costs that ends up having, it's 18.5 billion a year. Um, and I haven't put the statistic in, but this report shown here by the NHS Confederation paving a new pathway to prevention looks at various measures you can do to improve health and save energy. And well, I think it's to save health, mostly around health because it's an NHS thing, but they list the sort of top 20 interventions that either the NHS or local authorities can take. And in the top five, which is in the top three for local authorities, is fixing the houses that are so cold that make you ill. And if doing that, they say has a return on investment of 17 to 1. So it's kind of worth doing. Um, so yeah, in my role, I mostly do three things. I work on the Net Zero Terrace Streets project, which this little graphic shows. It's networked heat pumps. The Community Heat Development Unit, just trying to look at helping communities create community-owned heat networks. And I coordinate a couple of working groups, the Community Energy Heat one and the Energy Efficiency one, which is more about energy advice and retrofit and stuff like that. The Net Zero Terrace Streets is hoping ultimately to be a whole systems community decarbonisation service. And the plan is to offer affordable, low carbon energy, warm, healthy homes at no upfront cost to the householder. So it's a big task. It's a big, massive Innovate UK funded project, and they've had various other big funds over the years. So it's a very large, complex project. Yeah, there's loads of partners, as you can see from that little graphic. Um, but basically, the idea is do enough retrofit so that you can heat it with a small ground source heat pump, connect them all together in a ambient shared ground loop, otherwise just known as networked heat pumps. It's like it just taps the you drill some boreholes and then connects them together with some pipes, and that gets it up to about 12 degrees just from the heat of the ground. And then ground source heat pumps in individual buildings get that up to whatever it is, 45 degrees or whatever to heat your house. Um, but because of the what's known as the spark gap, the fact that gas is too cheap and electricity is too expensive, ironically, counterintuitively, because of the price of gas. I've never quite worked out that. There's a thing called the spark gap, which is the difference between kilowatt of gas versus electricity. So in order to make it affordable to run those heat pumps on electricity, which costs more than gas, we also want to add a community solar co-op and probably batteries and a smart local energy system which cleverly balances the demand and basically makes it easier for people to save money, is the short front of it. And yeah, the plan is to offer this at no upfront cost to householders and to just pay a standing charge. That's the goal. But it's about trying to make it investable, basically. So the idea is that the pipes that go in the ground and the boreholes, that's long-term infrastructure that will be there for 100 years or so. So the hope is, and it sounds like it might be possible, to get, pension funds or the National Wealth Fund or whatever, your long-term patient capital to invest in that infrastructure. And we want to add the cost of the retrofit to that investment so that they pay for it all at once, including the retrofit, and then the householders just pay it back slowly over 20 or 40 years with the standing charge.
That's a brilliant project. That's amazing. We're building long-term infrastructure with no upfront costs to the
Well,
household.
that's
Like that.
that's what we're shooting for, yeah.
Brilliant.
Um, and then there's also the Community Heat Development Unit, which is run by Share Energy, who are one of our amazing members who do all sorts of incredible stuff. This is funded by the Energy Redress Fund, which I'll mention later. But basically, it's trying to work out where might community-owned district heat networks, which are different to the Net Zero Terrace Streets project. So in a normal district heating system or heat network, you've got one big heat source, or maybe a few of them. Often it's waste heat from a data center or something. I mean, in Denmark, where they've got loads of this, I think most of the country's heated by it. It's mostly biomass boilers. But once the pipes and the infrastructure's there, you can always swap out the heat source to something else. But in this model, we're looking at giant air source heat pumps, basically, which would then heat loads and loads of water and pump it through giant insulated pipes to people's homes and to buildings and things. And partly what this was a response to is there's a very inspiring project in Swaffham Prior in Cambridgeshire where they've built one of these networks. And I think most of the town now is on it, and it gets basically, very hot water gets piped directly into your house, so you don't need a boiler or anything. And it's as hot as your gas boiler would make. So even though you should still retrofit if you can to save energy, they don't sort of have to retrofit the houses to still keep them warm because so much heat is going into them. And everyone got very inspired by Soft and Prior, and it's an amazing project, but it's not very replicable because they were just very, very lucky with getting big pots of government funding grants. Cambridgeshire County Council, I think, put 10 million in, and they took on all the risk. So it's just very unlikely that that's ever going to happen anywhere again, that all those things are converged. But lots of people inspired by that went off to explore, oh, let's see if we can do that. And most of those feasibility studies came back saying it would be brilliant in terms of carbon if you did do that, but there's no way to make it add up financially. Um, so Community Development Unit have sort of gone the other way around, and they've using all sorts of clever software and mapping, they try modeling. They've tried to work out, okay, well, where might it be viable? and what makes it viable. And the sort of short answer of what makes it potentially viable is you have to have enough density of demand in terms of loads of houses. Ideally, you want a big anchor load, like a swimming pool or something, someone that needs a lot of heat. And in order to close that spark gap and to be able to affordably power your giant air source heat pump, you need a wind turbine locally with a private wire to your air source heat pump to sell yourself cheap electricity, basically, that you generate yourself. And this mirrors, there's a good report by Possible called Wind Powered Heat. And yeah, sort of unlike solar, I mean, they did also map where you could put solar because that's still helpful. But unlike solar, wind much better correlates with when you need heat. It's windier in the winter when you need to heat places. So yeah, they've all the current outputs from that project are at communityheat.org.uk. I mean, one interesting caveat of all that is in order to make it all viable in the model, on the 10% of coldest days, I think it is, I might have got that wrong, but in that sort of order of range, you'd still have a backup gas boiler. Because just doing that with those 10% coldest days means you can halve the size of the air source heat pump that you need, makes the costs and running expenses much lower. And yeah, and I also mentioned I coordinate a couple of working groups, our community heat working group, which meets on the second Tuesday at 10 a.m., and our energy efficiency working group, which meets on the first Wednesday. Um, and some of the screenshots I've got here are just in one of those meetings, we were talking about the correlation that I mentioned earlier about heating and health, basically. Yeah, it's a big factor, both in terms of addressing the health needs, but also where we're piloting this net zero terrace streets up in Rosendale in Lancashire. Um, the way they've got the most interest and referrals for their community energy champions and things is via the local health service and the GP and stuff like that. Um, so that's very interesting. I'll quickly now go over some of the existing funding for home energy upgrades, which would be good to tell people about. Yeah, so there's Eco, I think it's now Eco 4 at the moment. That's for a whole house retrofit approach, so you can sort of, yeah, they'll probably tell you to do insulation first, and then they might say, okay, well, now get solar or a battery, or um, but you've got to, all of these things have got quite tight eligibility criteria, so you've got to work out if you can apply for them. So for this one, if you're a homeowner, it has to have an EPC of D or less. For private and social tenants, it has to be E or less, or worse, as it were. Um, and I think in addition to that, you've either got to be on means tested benefits or have a household income of less than 31 grand. There's the Warm Homes local grant. You can get 15 grand for energy efficiency and low carbon heating. Similar sort of criteria. Well, I should have said eco, you apply via our energy company for that.
Joseph, do these apply just to homeowners or also to say a community that's, multiple places of occupancy or whatever the word is?
Yeah, I think it's mostly homeowners, but some of them, like the Warm Homes local grant, there's definitely different parts of it aimed at local authorities and things like that. I'm not sure there is stuff out there for community-owned buildings and things like that. I was intending to work that out before this, but
Hmm,
let me come back to you on that one.
okay.
Um, and then there's the Great British Insulation Scheme. Again, that's for insulation, basically, as you might guess. I mean, in some ways, you might be able to thank Insulate Britain for that because that was announced not long after all their actions. Um, Again, you have to various criteria has to have a bad EPC and in particular tax bands. And then there's the boiler upgrade scheme, which is what most people use to fund the cost of a heat pump, or you could use it for a biomass boiler, but I think we need to get away from burning stuff, including wood myself. And that basically gives you 7.5 grand off whatever it is that you're buying, which makes getting a new heat pump sort of comparable with the cost of getting a new gas boiler. Although some people Yeah, I mean, in terms of carbon emissions, it's a heat pumps are so much more efficient that on average, I think within 13 months, but certainly within 2 years, if you swapped out, even if you had a brand new brilliant gas boiler, if you swap that out with an air source heat pump, well designed and well installed, um, you would save the embodied carbon of the boiler and the heat pump, yeah, within a year or two. They're they're so much better. But again, you have to have a EPC and etc. And the nice thing about this is you don't have to apply for it. Basically, the installer applies for it and then and installs it in your house. So that's some of the things, current funds out there. I mean, there should be lots more things coming online because the Labour Party have made lots of nice big promises, including in the local power plan. They say they're going to put 1 billion a year in low cost loans and grants. I think it's 600 million a year for interest for grants to local authorities and 400 million a year in low interest loans to community energy organisations. But I don't think the detail is announced yet, but I think we're expecting that later this year. Then if you want to start, or you've already started, because there probably is a member of ours near you somewhere. So I'd encourage you to check. I haven't got the link in here, but you'll find it on our website. We've got a map of our current members. Um, so yeah, see if you've got one locally, and if not, try and set one up. So some of the funds out there, there's the Energy Redress Scheme, which is, it's got 40 million quid in it or something, which is money they've got off energy companies. But for the big main theme, the biggest pot, only registered charities can apply. But there are other smaller pots, the Innovation Fund, the Carbon Emissions Reduction Fund, and I think there's another one called the Just Transition Fund. CICs and co-op societies and community benefit societies can also apply for. And there's a link to their site there, but we've got like a dedicated page about that on our website, as we also do for the Great British Energy Community Fund, which is the new name of what used to be called the Community Energy Fund or the Rural Community Energy Fund, if you're rural. Um, and that's sort of like the main fund that people use to do the feasibility study and then do the project development. And so, yeah, as you can see here, you can get 40 grand for feasibility studies and then up to 100 grand for project development. And yeah, that's for charitable incorporated organizations. Lots of different people can apply for that. And you apply via your local net zero hub. So there are regional net zero hubs around, I think there's 5 of them. So yeah, if you went to that link there, our page about them, it has a link to all the different ones and their contact details and who you should contact for each one because it's sort of the same fund, but it's slightly different in each region. So you have to go there to find out all the details. And yeah, there are a load more pots out there that are suitable and that also might well be suitable for climate emergency centres actually. So it's worth having a look. I mean, it's aimed at community energy, but a lot of the sort of stuff that happens in community energy centres has got lots of overlap
Mm.
with what some of our members do.
Yeah,
But
we want
yeah,
to encourage centres to promote renewable energy on the high street, and there's 32 odd spaces around the country doing that. So
yeah,
hopefully
exactly.
funding.
So yeah, there's loads more funding there. And finally, join Community England. So there's loads of ways that we can help you. We've got how-tos on the website. We've got a great Lumio forum. I mean, that for me is the secret source of CE membership because all our 300 odd members are in there. And it's just, I'm always blown away. If anyone's got any question about anything, all our members chime in with amazing answers. It's a brilliant space
Mm.
for kids, peer learning and networking and sharing and everything. And then we've got loads of events. If you are community energy, we list share offers that community energy organisations are doing. So if you go on that page, you'll find a bunch of there now, and not just share offers. Actually, these days, lots of them also do innovative finance ISAs, which are bonds basically. Um, and yeah, if you've got events related to community energy, you can submit them to go out in our newsletters and whatnot. And there's the link to the funding again. You can find out more on our website, communityenergyengland.org. We're on Blue Sky and YouTube and LinkedIn. I'm not sure why this slide doesn't have that. So yeah, follow us, network with us. There's loads of good videos on our YouTube channel, as there is on the Climate Emergency Centre's channel. And yeah, that's the link to go and check out membership. I think we're still running, if you're a brand new community energy organization, I think you can join for free for the first year, but it's only like 26 quid or 28 quid or something if you've got a low turnover anyway. So it's well worth joining. And yeah, that's it for now.
That's absolutely brilliant, Joseph. Everyone network that, yeah, Community Energy England, the
And of
fortnight.
course, join Community Energy England to get access to all of our members.
Brilliant. And that Lumio forum, glad they're using Lumio. That came out of some previous movements. All right, thanks very much.